We are recording the interview of Lawrence Peterson. This interview is being conducted by Ericka Carter from the Wright State University Veterans Voices Project. This interview is being recorded at the Holiday Inn, located at 2800 Presidential Drive in Dayton, Ohio. It is 8:15 a.m. on June 8th, 2019. Hi.
Good morning.
So happy to have you here.
Thank you.
Okay. Where and when were you born?
I was born in Greenport, New York on October 8th, 1950.
Okay. Who were your parents and what were their occupations?
My father was James Kenneth Peterson Sr. and my mother was Gloria Evelyn Holman Peterson. And my dad worked for Long Island Lighting Company as overhead lines and distribution supervisor. And my mother, she was a housewife until my younger twin sisters were in school, and then she became a tutor at the elementary school for reading. So she was teaching people, children reading to increase their, reading ability.
Was education really important in your house?
Oh yes. Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did your parents have college educations?
No.
No. Okay. You said you had twin sisters. Did you have any other siblings?
Yeah, I had an older brother and an older sister. My older brother, he was in the, he graduated high school. He went into the U.S. Coast Guard. He got sent to Vietnam in 1967 through early 1969 on board the USCG Bib. He was working, offshore, and then he got assigned duty to go in and fix. He was a damage controlman, so he would go in and fix the beach swift boats. You've probably heard of the swift boats. He'd have to get those refloated and back in operation, and so he did that for a year as well. Yeah. My sister, she was a preemie nurse. She took care of the babies that needed the extra care when they were born. And my brother retired in the Coast Guard, and he died a few years later. Unfortunately, things related to Agent Orange, but at the time they were not. They were refuted, because they said, "Well, you were Coast Guard, you were out there, you didn't, get into that." But it's just
what had happened.
Yeah.
Okay, so what were you doing before you entered the service?
I graduated high school in June of '69, went to Suffolk Community College in Selden, New York. I was studying broadcasting in front of and behind the mic. I did a year of that. It's a lot of electronics as well as learning about TV, and we had an AM station and FM station on the college stereo. Plus we had our own TV studio, and we were the first class moving into the new building, so we took the old studios from the old library into the new building, so it was interesting learning that as we went along. And they took us into the city one time to ABC, and we got to see where the wide world of sports was done, all the stuff coming in from around the world, being edited and things like that. Saw that one, I think it's One Life to Live being done. That was interesting too. And then that night we got to go to the Dick Cavett show, learn about what they're doing there. And I made friends with a couple of those guys, and they invited me back. So I was getting kind of like on-the-job training. So I would come in after school, go in, set up the cameras, set up the white balance and everything, bring out the color girl. She would come out with the makeup on, and we adjust the cameras and the white, balance and all. And then once they go on to taping, then I couldn't touch anything because it was all union. So I'd sit up there and behind the technical director and watch from engineering. So that was interesting learning that. And they said, well, when you graduate, come see us. We're going to send you to the Olympics in Germany, Munich. That would be in '72. But things changed.
Okay. So it's kind of like you were an intern and they got some free labor out of you.
Basically, yeah.
But you got
it was
wonderful learning.
It was amazing seeing how that's all done.
Okay. Now, when you say colored girl. Color girl.
They called her the color girl because she's got all the makeup on, all the bling jewelry, so you could set the, the clipping and stuff like that. you know, a lot of technical stuff. But
So, would she just have been the makeup artist?
No,
She was more than that.
Yeah, it'd be like one of the people that would come on the show, a girl, whatever, but, you know, with makeup and all, so you could adjust the colors and everything and the balances. Yeah, it's back when we had the old Plumacon cameras, not the digital cameras of today. So this is in 1970, but 69, 70 time frame. That's when the cameras were bigger.
Okay, I'd be interested to know what the equivalent of that role is today.
Yeah.
But that's just me.
Oh, it's a whole different world digitally now.
I'm sure. Yeah. I'm absolutely sure. Okay, so you did the 1 year of college?
Well, it was a 2-year program.
So.
But, you know, I went through the first year, I was on the dean's list and all that. And I had some problems, you know, girlfriends and things like that. Well, girlfriend. And her parents and all that. And then also in the spring of '70, they were having the moratoriums against the war. You know, that would start on Thursday, Friday, so they would basically cut, you know, the college course short on Thursdays and Fridays. They didn't have any, you know, and that kind of got me upset because I wanted to learn, and got me to the point where I finally went to Patchogue and saw the Air Force recruiter and says, "Take me away from all this." So I did.
So you weren't drafted, you volunteered?
Well, my number came up, but it was number 283. So I wasn't in any issue of getting drafted. But, you know, a lot of people around me, you know, basically that my background. My father was Army Air Corps during World War II. He used to fix radios on B-24s. His claim to fame was Jimmy Stewart was one of his pilots. After he came back from Europe, was training in the U.S. before getting ready to go to the Pacific when the war ended. So, you know, he had that background. And of course, my brother going in. And my cousin, he was a Marine. He was over there in '68, '69. He came back a little different, so did my brother. And, you know, it's just the background of my family in the military.
So patriotism.
Patriotism, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for that.
Now is the time for all good men to come to the aid of their country. You remember that?
I don't.
Oh, look it up on Google.
Okay. It sounds like that's true. And still true for today. All right. So you signed, why the Air Force?
Well, I didn't want to go in the Marines or the Army, flying around on the ground. And I love flying. I grew up, you know, near Suffolk County Air Force Base. They had the F-102s and 106s and 101s out of there, and they would, you know, it was close to the ADIZ, the Aircraft Identification Zone, and when the Russian bombers would head towards the U.S., they'd take off out of the alert shacks and go pretty much over the head of where I was living with sonic booms shaking the houses and all that. So I was always interested in the airplanes and in flying. So, yeah, that was kind of a natural thing for me to go to the Air Force, to fly and to fight. So, and I did get to do that.
You got to fly?
Yes, I did. Yes.
Wonderful. So, Air Force, recruiter, you're off to, where'd you go next?
Okay, so the recruiter said I could get into avionics, electronics, which I was more interested in. So they sent me to basic training, and I got the basic training in June, July, and August in San Antonio, which is not the best time of year to go down there. Had a number of red flag days. You know, it's interesting in basic training because you're learning to become strong individuals, but you're also learning to work as a team and to be able to pick up the ones that need help them out, and become members of the team. So, you know, I was stressed. We had one guy who didn't wear all his uniform stuff, so he wanted to keep it folded in his locker, you know, not have to, so he wore the same clothes every day. So after about a week and a half, the TIs got caught up on that. And so what they did is they came in and emptied all our lockers into the middle of the floor, and then took all our beds and piled them in the middle of the floor, and says, "You got a half hour to put it all back." Fold all the clothes, put them back, put the bed back together, and make the bed and all that other stuff. So that night, that particular young man had a little blanket party. We didn't hurt him. but he didn't screw up again. So you just learned that you all get treated as one, not just individuals, but one team. And when one of you messes up, everybody's got to pay for it. Everybody's got to. So you learn to work together, build that bond of trust and things with each other. So that was one of the major things about basic training. Yes, we had the obstacle course, the marching, that was all that, the exercise, and building on our military knowledge and experience. So it was quite a good beginning. And then after that, they sent me off to tech school. Like I said, I was trying to get into electronics, and the guy asked me, he says, "Where's your letter from the recruiter that says you're going into avionics?" I says, he just said I was going to. He promised me that, but he says, "Well, you got a choice, weapons or munitions." I says, "What's the difference?" He says, "Munitions is a BB stacker, stacking bombs and getting them ready for war weapons, where you work on the weapon systems on the airplane." I says, yes, airplane. So I went to tech school at Lowry Air Force Base in Denver, Colorado. I got there at the end of August and graduated just before Thanksgiving. I was an honor graduate from basic training from TAC Weapons School. Had a 97 average overall for the school, the highest in the class.
Congratulations.
And yeah, that was interesting. I wasn't expecting that. But anyway, while I was in school there, I wanted to go to Vietnam, and I wanted to become a gunner on gunships. You ever seen the movie The Green Beret, where they have the gunship come over the fire base and takes out the NVA that are over there, the Viet Cong and NVA? I was kind of like that idea of flying and fighting like that. And they told me, well, you have to be a 5 level to become a gunner. And since they were doing the Vietnamization, they were sending us people to Thailand rather than to Vietnam. So I got stationed at Nakhon Phanom Royal Thai Air Base, which is what we're having a reunion on today. So I got there on the 15th of January of 1971 and was there till the 2nd of January of 1972. It was an interesting year there. I was working with the 456th MMS in the A1 gun shop. So in the tech school, they were showing us this gun. He says, this is the last time we're teaching this gun because it's no longer in the Air Force inventory. Well, guess what? That's the gun I got sent to on the A1s flying at an NKP. They had A1s there for 2 purposes. One was search and rescue. They called the Starbirds. That were their call sign was Sandy. So when a pilot got shot down, the Sandys would come in, clear the area so that the Jolly Greens could come in and pick up the pilots. So it was very satisfying knowing the job I was doing was to pick up down airmen. Some of those were 1 or 2 days. Some of them were 2 to 3 weeks long.
Picking up the
airmen. The ones that were down in North Vietnam were in high threat areas in Steel Tiger, which is in Laos. It was difficult to get in there and get out of them. And the longer they were on the ground, the more the North Vietnamese would bring in anti-aircraft and things like that to try to shoot down the rescuers. So there was a couple of them that went 2 weeks long. So a max effort were basically at our station, duty station, at the gun shop, keeping the aircraft ready so they could go on a moment's notice. And then there's the other ones, which are called hobos. They would go out and do search and destroy missions and come back. And the airplanes came back, some with rather large holes in it, some didn't come back at all. That was the hardest part of my job, was keeping the gun records. And when we lose an aircraft, we'd have to take the gun records over to maintenance. Had the serial numbers on that, and that was not a fun job to do. Anyway, so that's...
You mentioned Jolly Green. Are those Green Berets?
No, Jolly Greens are pararescue people. They're helicopters, HH-53s. They would go in and they have a PJ on it. If they needed to, the PJ would go down on the ground and help the aircrew if he was injured or whatever, get back up in the airplane. Lost a lot of PJs over there and lost a lot of Jolly Greens. Like I said, the Sandys would come in and do a lot of suppression in the area. you know, to put down smoke screens and stuff like that to get the jollies in there. But you know, it was rough. It was real rough.
Right.
Well, and later on, I found out a little bit about what they did. So we lost a couple gunships, and they went in and picked up some of the crew that had survived. So it was leaving NKP after my year there. I knew that I was heading to fly with this AC-130s Spectre gunships out of Wuhan. That if I could get out of the airplane and survive, they were going to come get me, and that was the most positive thing I left out of there. The dedication and due diligence they had. I knew that, you know, I would be picked up.
So since I've been here doing some interviewing, I've talked to, yesterday I talked to a pilot that was a part of Sandy's, and he talked about how refreshing it was to be able to go in and save those people. And then I talked to a mechanic of the airplanes that kept those airplanes going. So you being a part of a team like that,
right.
Everybody had individual jobs, and you didn't necessarily know what somebody else's job was, but overall you guys did the mission. It was amazing. Even though not everybody was always positive, you guys did great work there. And I really appreciate that.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
I just, like
I said, we knew our job was the toughest that they had over there, and the most important.
So being here, visiting with your group, talking to other people, how has that felt? Pretty.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's kind of an emotional, you know, seeing some of these guys. You haven't seen them almost 50 years, and you know, they've all gotten older, just like me, but they still have the spirit. They still have that spirit, and that's the important part. But I'm sorry, I'm getting kind of emotional.
No, this is. I would love to visit with my Iraq folks and have a good time, and you guys look like you're having a great time with the drinking and the laughing and the joking around.
Oh yeah, the camaraderie was, you know, second to none. And not only did I work in the gun shop there, but I also got to load flares. I don't know if you talked to anybody on the candle ships, on the C-123s. Load flares on there. They would go out and light up the trail, whatever they needed light over, you know, and in the dark.
Is that like for the Ho Chi Minh Trail?
Yeah, and over, you know, troops in contact in Vietnam or in northern Laos or southern Laos. But and some of the 21st SOS, which had the CH-3s and CH-53s, you know, they would take people here, there, and since we were the closest base to North Vietnam and to the DMZ and to the Ho Chi Minh Trail, we had a lot of different organizations there supporting that effort. So it was quite a unique base, you know, in the different jobs they had. You know.
I don't think that I've asked anybody this yet, but what was do you know what the actual manpower status was? Like, how many people might have been there?
Oh, geez, I was there in '71. I think it was about the biggest time the base had. I really couldn't tell you how many people were there, but I don't know if you've seen our poster, but with all the different emblems of all the different units assigned there, I'm sure, you know, it was several thousand. But yeah.
Okay.
I don't know the exact amount. Like I said, I was just one little part of all that was there, and there was stuff there from 7th Air Force, 13th Air Force, and, you know, all over. So a lot of unique jobs being done there. So
yeah. I'll get that number.
And remember, we're only nine miles from Laos. Which, yeah.
Okay. So. All right. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
One of the other jobs I had there, since I was low-ranking airman, out of basic and tech school, still M16 qualified, is we got to be what we were assigned. There was no orders or anything. He says, "Oh, by the way, you're doing security augmentee duty." So there was a base speaker system called Giant Voice, And we would get the call, a giant voice would come up and says, all augmentees report to security police. So we'd have to go and change into our camouflage uniforms and show up to security police. And they'd issue us M16 and the bandoliers of ammo, and we were assigned to either a team or we were assigned to a specific individual. And we went out and gave additional protection around the perimeter and other special areas there in case of base attack. Thankfully, there were some firefights, but thankfully I never had to fire the weapon. But you know, we were under constant threat of attack since we were so close. You know, the Pathet Lao, the Laotian communists, and the NVA. You know, they were trying to get in and attack the base because of our support for the war. Yeah.
Did you come over with any of your friends?
There were 6 of us from tech school that came over there. 2 of them went to the OV-10, the 23rd Task, to work on loading those airplanes. 2 of them were loading A-1s, and then me and Kabaza, who was from Brooklyn, we were assigned to the gun shop, A-1 gun shop. So, yeah. After that, when I went off to gunship training, I lost track of all those guys. But, yeah, it was good knowing somebody over there for a while anyway.
And I'm sure you made new comrades.
Oh yeah,
okay.
Oh yeah. No, Barry, who's running the reunion here, he was in the gun shop same time I was. So that's the whole good thing about the social media coming together, is you get to find old people, and of course you get all these different bases getting together, and you're watching the people on there, and you say, oh yeah, I remember him, remember them, him or him. Yeah, so it's allowed us to get together. It has its good points and its bad points, but it does allow better communication. Yeah. Then you get to emails and sending pictures back and forth and learning about what they did after and how their families have grown and things. It's good to know. And of course, we remember the ones that didn't come back, the real heroes. So, yeah.
Okay. How did you end your tour there?
Well, at NKP, it was I got my orders to go to gunship training. I left on the 1st or 2nd of January of '72, flew to Kadena, Okinawa, did altitude chamber there, which I needed to get done.
Tell me.
Altitude chambers, they put you in an enclosed thing like you're in an airplane, take you up to 40,000 feet, then blow the door open. And did rapid decompression. You've probably heard about that on airplanes and things like that. And learning about hypoxia, how long with minimal oxygen and how your brain works. You're filling out forms and doing math, and next thing you know, you just kind of, with the pen, you know, as your hypoxia takes over and you start to pass out. So just learn the signs of hypoxia and decompression. You know, you make sure that you're not holding your breaths when you have a decom. You just breathe normally, and so you don't want to lose your lungs.
I'm so happy they do that indoors now.
Yeah. So, yeah, that was that training, and then that was my first time ever flying on a C-5 from Kadena back to Hickam. Me and 3 other guys and the crew were the only ones on the airplane. It was an empty airplane, so that was interesting. Flying back, is a big airplane, huge airplane, and learned to play basketball at 35,000 feet. That was interesting, but yeah, you're dribbling along and you hit an air pocket. It's a little, yeah. But yeah. Years later, I saw one of the guys that was flying back then and says, what happened to because they had one on display. He says, where's your basketball hoop? He says, oh, they made us take those all off. But yeah, yeah, it's a big airplane. Yeah.
Okay, so you returned to Hickam?
Yeah, and then flew into Travis on another airplane, and then from there to Atlanta, down into Eglin Auxiliary 9, called Herbert Field at the time. Now it's Herbert Air Force Base. We're Special Operations, the main Special Operations base now, there in Cannon Air Force, which is Special Operations West. And that's where the Air Commando Squadrons are, so like the A-1s and all the specialized operations were all training there. So I trained for 2 months on special operations training and also on AC-130 gun shop operation, and we flew several training missions, going out and shooting the guns and learning how to operate in that environment. Those are all, 2 of those were daylight missions and 2 of them were nighttime missions. And of course, Spectre was a fly-by-night outfit. Most of the time we were flying over the Ho Chi Minh Trail at night, or troops and contacts over Vietnam, or up in northern Laos, PDJ, all the way down through Phnom Penh in Cambodia. So when people ask me where did I fly, I say Southeast Asia, because it wasn't just Vietnam, it was all over. Matter of fact, we were up in the northern Laos, up there by the China-Vietnam border, shooting at a fire base around a mountain. We were on oxygen, we were so high, about 17,000 feet, trying to shoot the 105 howitzer. And they had a MiG call, so we had to duck down into the mountains and fly south, get away from that. But yeah, so anyway, Herbert doing that training. Then I went to Fairchild Air Force Base in Washington in March. Snow during the night, rain or snow during the day. Out there learning how to survive in, basic survival school, including the POW training and escape and evasion and stuff like that.
How long?
13 days.
It was 13 days?
Yeah.
What other ranks were out there with you?
Oh, well, we had second lieutenants, majors, lieutenant colonels. So we were mixed in. So we had airmen, sergeants, and all in this one group. We had several different groups around, and we'd learn how to train, go across terrain at night, using compass, maps, escape and evasion, obstacle course we had, trying to get through the obstacle course. And of course, then we get captured and put interned to a POW. First it was isolation for about 2 to 3 days, and they'd bring you out and do interrogations, put you in stress positions so that you learn what it's like. They couldn't hit you, but you try leaning against the wall with 2 fingers, with your feet 3 feet from the wall, and see how long before that hurts.
So I imagine not long.
Yeah, it's it gives you enough pain to understand. And the little isolation cabinet they put you in, you couldn't stand up, you couldn't sit down. It was just a small cabinet. And then every once in a while, they're playing that music and the anti-American slogans and stuff that they were putting on, Jane Fonda and all that good stuff. But anyway, they would come by and knock on all the cabinets, make sure you're all awake, or open the cabinet, pull you out, make you get in a stress position, throw you back in. They give you a little coffee can. So if you had to urinate or whatever, that's what you had. And then about 6 hours, they'd hand you in a little cup of something to eat. It's mostly water, like chicken broth or something like that. So it gave you an idea of what it might be like if you ever got captured. But, I didn't.
How, after going through that training and then knowing what you were doing before with Sandy and Hobo, right?
Yeah.
How did that make you feel? Like did it make you feel even more?
Hopefully I get picked up rather than go into a camp, yes.
Right, but did it make you feel even more proud that you were a part of?
Knowing how many Americans were already in Hanoi prisons and stuff like that, yeah. It made you more aware of what they were going through, and a little more pride in that, knowing that if you were part of that, you could get through it, generally. But
being like, I was a part of those rescue missions and those Jolly Greens, that even if they lost their lives, they were in it to save,
that others may live is their motto. That others may live.
And to stop all that pain and harassment, because
right.
Even though they couldn't hit you, those other POWs were probably...
Yeah, they're getting beaten, yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's something.
Yeah.
Wow.
So after going through that was 13 days. 5 of it was in class training, and then of course the obstacle course and doing the transits at night and during the day. Oh, another interesting thing was we would do call-ins for pickup. So like setting the Sandies and the Jolly Greens, you communicate with them to come pick you up and guide them in. Well, if you did a good job, the crew chief on the helicopter would throw out a Juicy Fruit 6-pack, 5-pack of gum on a handkerchief parachute. And of course, a lot of trees out there, so it'd land in the top of trees. You'd see these, lieutenants and captains and all scrambling up the tree, up to the top of the tree, trying to get that juicy fruit. Because we didn't have a whole lot with us when we were out there on the training.
I'm pretty surprised the airmen didn't get to it.
Well, they had higher rank.
Oh.
Although out there, basically, rank was just a rank. I mean,
It was something you wore.
Yeah, and your whole idea was working together as a team to get out. But so we finished that training up, and then I went home. I went home it was Easter of '72. I had just gotten home on the 27th. And of course, we're watching the news, and on the 29th of March, we lost a gunship over Laos. The whole crew was gone. Got hit by an SA-2, which the 7th Air Force said could never be in Laos. A friend of mine, Bill Walters, is doing a history, and he's got information from the CIA of documents they got from the North Vietnamese that shows what they were doing. And they were bound and determined to shoot down a gunship over the trail during that offensive in '72. Well, they got that one that night, and then the next night they lost another E-model gunship, the first one with the 105, aircraft 571. Luckily, they got hit by 57s, 57 millimeter AAA, and they were able all to get out. And that became known as the Great Easter Egg Hunt of 1972. It says they picked up those 14 crewmen across Laos from the Ho Chi Minh Trail towards Thailand. And that was after one night of losing the whole crew in the airplane, and then the next night, at least everybody getting out, lost the airplane, but they got everybody back. That was quite an experience. So my mother is saying, "Who are you flying with? Where are you going?" I says, "Well, that's the gunships I'm going to be flying." Remember, there's only about 10 or 12 of them, and now they were too short at that time, although we were getting some new ones. But it's 16th SOS Spectre out of Udon. So she didn't want me to go. She did everything but beg me not to go. But my dad knew that I'd volunteered. My brother had done a little over a year and a half. My cousin had done time. I had already done 1 year at NKP. My mother says, "Why are you going again?" I says, "Well, that's what I wanted to do. I volunteered." So I left and went, got through jungle survival school down at Clark. That's basically a little bit of extension of what we did in basic, except it was in jungle related, learning what we could eat and what you shouldn't eat and how to evade in the jungle and hide. And so that was another 7 days of that. And then I went to Ubon, signed in. At the airport, I got picked up. The squadron was pretty big as far as people, so they had a bus that would go over to the terminal and pick up any Spectre people coming in. I was the only gunner on board, so on that flight. So I met the NCOIC of the gunner section, Jake Mercer, Master Sergeant Jake Mercer. He took me back, got me settled into the barracks, took me over to the squadron, got me introduced, and walked around and all that. And so he made me feel quite comfortable coming in there. And then I started flying on the 3rd of May, '73. You had what you call the in-country check ride. So about the first 10 missions, you're getting in-country qualified. And then on that last mission, you would fly with a flight examiner who would qualify you. And that night we were flying Balls 11, 011 was the aircraft, as an A model. And I picked up a flight examiner. His name was Staff Sergeant Richard Nyhoff. And went out pre-flight of the airplane, came back, and the guys were asking me, he had to go over to the squadron and fill out some paperwork. So at the PE, when we're getting ready for flight, get our, survival vests and everything, get sanitized, ready to go for a crew briefing. They asked me, says, "Who'd you get?" And I says, "Oh, I got Sergeant Nyhoff." And he says, "Oh no, not magnet ass." Everybody that flew with him had some kind of AAA or something. People pick up names over there, but for some reason he seemed to attract all the AAA and stuff like that.
What's a AAA?
Anti-aircraft fire.
Oh.
They had the ZPU. They had, was just 12.7 millimeter, 23 millimeter quad guns, 37 millimeter, 57 millimeter, 88s. But they, all that AAA, and plus we had SAM, surface-to-air missiles. They had the radar-guided SA-2s, looked like telephone poles. There's a picture of that you can show on that. And they had the shoulder-fired Strelas, which are heat-sinking missiles. And in April, May, June of '72, they were starting to bring a lot of that down since they weren't bombing Hanoi anymore in Haiphong, they were bringing all that down to the trail to try to get us. And we went to work on the trail first. When we took off, we went to the trail, did some bore sighting and getting ready, and then they called us over to the Ashaw Valley area, where we helped out with the TIC, Troops in Contact, South Vietnamese with an American advisor. Helped them out for a little bit, and then we got called over above Quang Tri up on the DMZ, above Hue. It's Hue, Quang Tri, and then the DMZ. There was T-34 tanks coming across the DMZ. This is about 11 o'clock at night. So the 11s start kicking in. I'm on aircraft 011, a little after 11 at night, and we got we started shooting at the tanks, and the EWO, the electronic warfare officer, starts getting the radar warnings from his raw gear, and next thing you know, we had to break off and start heading south towards Da Nang because of the threat. We had 2 F-4s we had picked up that were escorts for us, and they were breaking off too, and they got the launch, and a 3-ringer and then a launch. And so the EWO called the launch, and we're chinking back and forth. Turn left, kick out chaff, turn right, kick out chaff, back and forth. And the IO picked the missiles coming off the ground, and he was tracking them visually. And at the last minute, he called the break along with the EWO, and we rolled that 130 over in kind of like a modified split S with positive G and dove for the ground, and we evaded those SA-2s. They went off above us. You could hear us shake the airplane as they exploded. And the shrapnel hitting against the side of the aircraft, I was hanging on the number 6 gun. Rich Nyhoff was hanging onto the 40 mil rack, and we're diving towards the ground, and the pilot pulled out, and then we were probably maybe 100 or 200 feet off the ground when we finally leveled out. I went and grabbed my chute. We wore a chest harness. I went and grabbed my chute and sat back on the ramp because we had the ramp door open. And that's what Rich wanted me to do, get ready in case we had to bail out, because we didn't know how much damage we had taken. And the pilot's checking the airplane out, and he's calling over the radio. He says, "I'm checking it out. I think we're okay. Just hang on. Everybody get ready to go if we have to." And so I'm sitting there on the ramp with my feet hanging off. and Rich is right behind me alongside the IO and some of the other guys. And he starts climbing out, and I look down and I see these white things in parallel lines. And I asked the IO, says, "What is that?" He says, "Well, that's the water breaking on the beach down below." We were, he says, we're maybe 100, 150 feet above the beach, and the luminescence of the waves as they were hitting the beach, that's what I was seeing. And we started climbing out, and the pilot says, "I think we're okay. We're going to go head for Da Nang, check out the airplane." By the time we got to Da Nang, we were up high enough. He says, "I think we're all right. We'll RTB, return to base, back to Ubon," flying back over the trail, the Laos and over to Ubon. And so that was my in-country check ride. And Rich Nyhoff wrote up in my thing, I got a copy of that for you too. He says, "Larry, followed proper procedures and all that, possible emergency bailout situation, blah, 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 and qualified me for the flight. I said, great, good. Well, less than a month later, on 18 June 72, Jake Mercer, Rich Nyhoff, and the rest of that crew were shot down. So, basically some of the first people I met are now gone. So, it's, anyway, yeah, so we lost a couple of guys got blown out of the airplane and were picked up, but we lost the rest of the crew. Of course, my mother heard about that, and now she was writing me a letter every day, at least once a week. She was doing it every couple of weeks, and then she's doing it once a week, and then almost every day.
What did her letter say?
Just talking about what's going on at home. She didn't want to, you know, alarm me or anything, but she was
worried,
missing her.
Did those letters help keep you in good spirits?
Oh yeah, oh yeah, but yeah.
I found that I didn't have much time to write back. Did you have time to write back every day?
I tried to, at least once a week, but yeah, it's yeah. But you know, I got onto a new crew after the Checkride, onto an E-model, and we took a crew picture, and I sent it back to my mother, and she saw me. I'll have a picture of that for you too. And basically, I'm here, and over here is.
Let me see it. Can you show it to the camera?
Yeah. So this is me here, and that's Davy Crockett, flight engineer. You know, when I was growing up, I had a coonskin cap and all that. Davy Crockett says, "Mom, don't worry. I'm flying with Davy Crockett. We're okay now." So this is a whole crew, 14 crew members, 7 officers, 7 enlisted. The pilot, co-pilot, flight were, of course, officers. The navigator, the sensor operators, and the fire control officer were all officers. Then there's 5 gunners and an IO, illuminator operator, who basically hung out the back as a scanner. And one of the gunners would be in the right window as a scanner as well. So he has as many eyes out of the airplane as possible.
What are you standing in front of?
Well, this is the 105 howitzer here. The 40 millimeters just over, and the 20 millimeters are up front. This is a 2 kW light, which we'd use for battlefield illumination.
Here we go.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank
and,
you.
That's what a standard crew was. And this is Tech Sergeant Graves and me that was our gun crew. And I've got a 38 in my mouth that I'm chewing on. You know, just playing the big guy, right? And
did your mom see that picture?
Yeah, I sent it to her, but you know, she was very worried about me, and you know, the Air Force was doing the bulk of the war then. You know, they had the South Vietnamese were doing most of the ground fighting with some advisors, U.S. advisors. So you know, there was one camp we came into. They had a beacon. They put the beacon over their bunker, show us where they were, so we knew where they were. And they said anything around out there is not friendly. So we spent the next 2 hours taking out all the. We had about 1,200 killed in action that night from the NVA and the Viet Cong and all that. But you know, it's just trying to keep them alive was what we were trying to do. And they got picked up the next morning and carried out of that fire base. But Fire Base Ross, I think that was up in MR1 not far from the Shaw Valley. But yeah.
You mentioned you were writing to your mom, so you didn't have a sweetheart or weren't married yet?
When I was in basic training, that gal I was talking to you about, I was engaged to her at the time. Her mother died, and her brother came out from Denver and got her and took her back to Denver. And she basically gave me a Dear John letter and saying I can't, my brother won't let me, blah, blah, blah. So that was kind of heartbreaking, but deja vu.
Okay. So that was your second deployment.
Yep.
And you said you had one more.
Yeah. So when I left, I flew for a year from the 3rd of May of 72 to first week or so of May of 73. Of course, the Vietnam War ended in January 21st, 22nd, something like that. We were still flying in Laos and Cambodia till the Laos War ended a month after the Vietnam War, and then we were flying in Cambodia even up till after I left. But I left, and they sent me to Cannon Air Force Base in Mexico, which I thought was the end of the world. They had feedlots all around the base, and it was hot and it always smelled bad. But anyway, they had F-111s there, and I was put onto a load crew, became a load crew chief, loading bombs, practice bombs, and 111s, and we did training with nukes and things like that. But I heard through the grapevine that they were looking for instructor gunners, because towards the last 5 months I spent with Spectre the first time, I became an instructor. And the people coming in, new people that had to go through that in-country training to become familiar with the local operations and make sure they, knew the guns and all that. So I did that, and so anyway, I heard they were looking for instructor gunners, so I came back. I replied back to Randolph, that says instructor gunner, and Kissinger was another one. And we called them up, and they said, yeah, go down to CBPO and tell them, we're bringing you back as instructor gunners. That's what we're in critical need of.
What rank were you?
I had just become staff sergeant at that point.
And that's at E5, right?
E5,
okay.
Yeah. And so we went down to CBPO, and CBPO says, you got to be here a year before you can go anywhere. And he says, okay. So we called Randolph back in, and a week later they sent us to water survival because we'd missed that the first time down at Homestead, and there was a hurricane coming in. That was in September. And so we still got the training in, but we couldn't do the parasailing. But we're spending the night out there on a raft in the water. And for about 5 days afterwards, I'll just be sleeping in bed going, So that was interesting there. And since we already had snake school, we went back right over to Ubon again. So I flew gunships again. Back then it was mostly standby, in case we were needed somewhere. We'd go out pre-flight the airplane and then go sit into the conference room waiting on alert. And then a couple of times a month we'd be able to go out and start engines, do taxi, go get the pilots their touch and goes for what they needed to keep current. And then once or twice a month we'd let us go down to Gulf of Siam. We'd kick out a flare and shoot at it, except that we were so accurate that we'd blow the flare out of water, so we had to do offsets. And there's a video that shows the guy drew a truck on the monitor on one of the sensors, on the TV sensor, and says, okay, that's the truck, and then here's the flare. So we were shooting at the truck. But anyway, yeah, on the water. But so we do that and then go back to Utapao, get some more fuel because it was a long, and then fly back up to Ubon.
So it definitely wasn't as exciting.
It didn't have the adrenaline. Oh, that's the thing, that's the thing I missed most was the adrenaline of that year of flying combat. And the camaraderie. I mean, we flew as a crew, we partied as a crew, so officers and enlisted alike, we had our own parties. Yeah, after the flight, we'd go to the NCO club, the officers would go to the Oakville club, but, we would have a few beers and relax and, just wind down from the mission. And then, we'd go do our thing and go back the next night, fly another mission. And, there's a lot of close calls, and but we had what we were doing when we weren't shooting at trucks on the trail trying to prevent the supplies from going down south. We were helping troops in contact, and saving them from, so they could fight another day. So you always felt good about what you were doing. And yes, we lost an airplane in 18 June, and then we lost our final one in 21 December. of '72. Had a couple friends on there. One was the IR, who was Joel Birch. He's on the wall too. Most of the guys I flew with are on 1W at the wall. That was towards the end of the war. And so we were flying radio-controlled airplanes. You know, a lot of us in the squadron flew radio-controlled airplanes, and I'll send you a couple pictures of that too. And you know, that was our hobby. Rather than going downtown chasing women or drinking and boozing, you know, we went to the hobby shop, blew off our time. At night we were building airplanes, and during the day we were out flying them, and out next to the perimeter. And you know, that kept us busy, and it's what we enjoyed. Yeah, I got yeah. So here I am out here with the binoculars. I'm keeping close track of the air traffic. So whenever an airplane was coming by, we'd have to bring the airplanes down lower so that they could fly over. But that was our RC field at Ubon. And then later on, this is when we moved to Checkride in July of '74. We were flying airplanes out there. There's another shot of Ubon. I'd say I'll get you better pictures of these. But that's what I enjoyed doing. Like I said, I was flying. And when I was 10 years old, this was my first airplane. So I was very proud of that. Built that and on the go-kart and go up and down the road. My brother would pull me. And yeah. So that's, like I say, airplanes have been in me for quite a while. After I went down to Cannon for when they retired my airplane, and I got interviewed by the Veterans in Blue. So this picture here is hanging in the Pentagon that they took of me, and so if you go to the Veterans in Blue website on I think it's book 5, I'm down there on the list, and my squadron commander, he's on the same one, a few of them before me. So,
well, you did not tell me I was sitting here with a superstar, sir.
No, I'm no superstar, no hero. I'm just a guy that, you know, did his job. But oh, you're asking about the SA-2s? These are the telephone poles that they shot at us that night. Soviet-made SA-2s, they're radar-guided missiles. Yeah, 300-pound warhead. They fly at Mach 3, so we didn't have much time to react. So, yeah. And yeah. So when I left Ubon, I had flown 123 plus missions. The reason I say plus is because we were flying a lot of Saigon defense missions in November, December, and January. We were sent down there to help protect the capital. We would get down there about dusk, shoot at different targets they gave us, land at Tan Shinut or Ban Hoa about midnight, refuel, rearm, and then take back up, and then fly around again, shooting whatever they want us to shoot at till about dawn, and then they would release us and fly back. So, like I said, 123 plus missions, 545 combat hours. An A model flight was good for 4 or 4.2 hours. An E model flight was about 6.2 hours. So we were flying long missions, you know, compared to F4s or whatever. So, yeah. And I earned the 10 air medals. I was awarded 10 air medals, a couple of them for specific missions, and then I was awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross. I'll send you those as well. So, you know, I was pretty proud of what I did.
I'm pretty proud of you too.
Well, you know, there's guys that did more, trust me. But you know, I did what I could. And then after, you know, like I said, I came back for instructor gunner, and like I say, we were doing mostly training and alert missions. And I ended up with a little over 800 hours total on AC-130 gunships. So at the end of my tour there, they were looking for me to re-enlist. Though I was also first term of the year for the 16th SOS, the 8th TAC Fighter Wing, and I was sent up to 13th Air Force, first term of the year. I didn't make 13th, but all that. I was Safety Man of the Month. one of the additional duties I was doing the second year I was with Spectre, the third tour, was doing safety for, and I got the Air Force Commendation Medal for that, and Safety Man of the Month for the 8th Attack Fighter Wing and 16th SOS. So, you know, I had 9s on all my APRs throughout. Like I say, I was there to do a job, and I wanted to do it well, and I put myself to it, and you know, tried to do the best thing I could. I tried to. We towards the end of '74, we had a Marine major that came in to evaluate taking over the gunship program into the Marines rather than the Air Force, and of course, I didn't want to be no jarhead, so I looked at alternatives, and I wanted to get into electronics again, so I tried to cross-train electronics. They said, no, you're in a critical career field, you know, weapons technician, so you can't cross-train into that. And I said, okay, how about boomer operator, you know, refueling on KC-135s or whatever, and they said, no, again. I says, well, then I'm getting out. We'll try that for a while. So I got out of the Air Force, came back, signed out at Travis, and that's when that 4 years, 4 months, 27 days, 13 hours, and 21 minutes, from the time I left home to the time I went home in Colorado, so from Riverhead to Colorado, that was the time in service. I went on to inactive reserve and got released from the reserves on 9 June of 1976. I had thought a couple times. I heard the gunships moved back to Hurlburt. They didn't get rid of them. They didn't decommission them or anything. And I thought about re-enlisting and going back and flying there, but I didn't. Several of the guys I flew with, they made chief and stayed with the gunships the whole time. You know, going to Panama and Grenada and Bosnia, Iraq, Afghanistan. So, yeah, I probably could have stayed in and made chief, but, you know, I did do good on the outside. You know, I got into electronics. When I got out, I went back to Colorado Springs. There wasn't much hiring done in 1974-75 timeframe, and I kept knocking on doors, and this one electronics distributor. I was there usually on Monday and Friday. I went there first thing, and it says, "You got anything I could do?" And finally, I walked in there one day. He handed me the broom and says, "Go ahead and get going." So I started sweeping, and then I was doing, you know, stocking and shipping, receiving, and then I worked my way up to sales, and then I started my own business, putting in antenna systems and closed circuit TV and stuff like that, and got to meet a guy who's doing the armories around the 5-state region, and I helped him upgrade all the systems in all the armories in that area. Then he introduced me to another guy who was doing contracting with the Air Force, and I went out to Peterson Field, and we redid all the fire alarm systems on Peterson Field. And then that got me into doing, you know, I was doing burglar alarm systems for homes and businesses and fire systems. And then we started putting in halon systems in, you know, for people that had computers and specialized stuff. So I was putting a halon system in this new business called Inmos Semiconductor, Inmos Corporation. And I was putting it in there, and I was working there late one night, and the guy that was managing all that, he was still there. And I asked him, I says, "Is you guys looking for anybody?" He says, "Well, you're a contractor, so I couldn't ask, but since you asked me," he says, "Yeah, I like the way you're working and all that." So he says, "Come by and get a, next chance you get an application." Mm-hmm. So I stopped by, got the application, and I looked at it and says, "You know, I don't have any digital electronics experience. I don't have this, I don't have that." Oh well, I put it aside. 2 weeks later, we're having a security show for homes and businesses at a mall. He comes by with his wife and kids, and his wife's pushing the new baby in the carriage and all. He says, "When are you going to bring that app back for me?" And he says, "Okay." You know, so I went home that night. That was a Sunday. Went home that night, filled it out, and the next day I took it over to him, and he says, "Can you come back tomorrow, Tuesday at noon?" Okay, so I says, "Sure, fine." So I came back. He was an Air Force captain. He had just gotten out of the Air Force. He had worked at the Silo Research Lab at the Air Force the TV guided missile. So to give you a little background on him, and he decided to get out and get into computer rooms and stuff like that. And so he was a systems engineer, and so I came back the next day. This couldn't be any better than this. I've done interviews before and been really, but I got in. He says, "Can you wait a few minutes?" He says, "Yeah." So he went over and checked. He says, "He'll see you in about 10 minutes." So I went over to see the HR representative. There's a guy, about a little older than me, and I went over and sat down, and he's looking at my application. He says, "Oh, you were in the Air Force." I says, "Yeah." "What'd you do?" And I told him, I was doing flying gunships and all that other stuff, and blah, blah, blah. He says, "Oh, you remember December of '72? I says, "Very well." But he says, we lost 17 B-52s over the north in December '72 down on Linebacker 2. He says, "I was one of the aircraft that was hit. And one of the jobs we picked up at that time, since we had the sensors, low light level TV and infrared, was if any of those B-52s coming back across Laos or Thailand had to bail out, we had the sensors to locate them so that they get picked up immediately." Well, his B-52 made it back to Utapao, but he was co-pilot on the airplane. He says, "Yeah," he says, "thank you for being there for my fellow." So we talked about the Air Force for 20 minutes. Never asked me about my education background or nothing. I says, "Well, aren't you going to ask anything?" He says, "No." He says, "I got Jim's offer letter here." Now remember, he was a captain in the Air Force. He didn't care about what degrees you had. He cared about what you could do and what you knew how to do and what you could learn how to do. So he hired me for $2.50 more an hour than I was making at that time. And he went on, and that was in Moss. He hired me at Honeywell. He hired me at a special company. And then he hired me at Compact. So he hired me 3 or 4 times in my career, and he just kept helping me advance. So ended up taking over his job when he retired as a data center manager with Hewlett Packard. So yeah, quite a jump from a little old gunner. But yeah, so I've had a I would have liked to have had the Air Force career. Kind of liked to have that because I love flying the gunships and all that. But then again, I had this career.
And you got weekends and vacation.
Yeah.
Guaranteed.
Yeah.
And home at 5, right?
Yeah.
All right.
So.
And eventually you got married.
Mm-hmm. Well, I've been married 4 times.
Okay.
Okay, the first one didn't last very long. She didn't want any kids. That was 9 years. I'd married her when I went to Canada. And then the next one we had 3 kids, and she already had one. I adopted him. So, and my youngest one is a police officer. And my middle one is named after Jake Mercer. Jake Edward Peterson is named after Jack Edward Mercer that got shot down on 18 June. And my oldest one, he's working for Metro PCS, Metro or TIF, whatever, one of those call centers for phones. But and the one I adopted, he's a truck driver. So it's been And my third wife, she was 50 years old and she died of a heart attack, so that was rough. And then I met this gal a year later, and she's great. So Rita, and we're doing fine. We're both retired, and just living the life of Riley, I guess. Trouble is, about getting old, everything hurts a little more faster. But other than that, the spirit's still there. So that's what's important. And like I say, we have the Spectre reunion that goes on every year at Fort Walton Beach. The first time I went was in 1987, and I went about every 5 years after that. In the last 10 years, I've been going every year, just because we're all starting to die off, from the different things. Like I said, I had non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, had heart issues and stuff like that, so I went and signed up for the Agent Orange registry, and I have basically 5 problems related to Agent Orange. Now my DD-214 says 986 days Thailand, no time for Vietnam, even though I flew over Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia. They don't count when we landed, refueled, rearmed. So I went ahead and took the registry just to make sure. Is this really Agent Orange related? And they seem to think so. But the VA, well, this is the third time going to the VA, and I'm waiting to hear back from them now whether I'll get anything for the Agent Orange related issues. But you know, yeah, there's 3 times I've almost been lost to a heart issue, and then when I had the non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, I had an infection in my port, almost killed me. But you know, and then I had pulmonary embolisms after I had shoulder surgery. But you know, I'm still here, so enjoy seeing the guys while we can. This year already, we've lost 10 Spectre people. You know, they're not old enough to die of old age. They're dying of you know, cancers and things like that. But yeah, so it's getting harder. But I like to go and see the guys as much as I can. And this one, it's the first and probably the last NKP reunion. Like I say, it's been real good. You know, meeting some of the people, all the different jobs that were done there. Like I say, it was a base at the end of the world. When I was at Lowry, I asked the guy, he asked me, he says, where are you going? I told him, it says NKP. Naked Fanny. He says, yeah. He says, I was there 2 years ago, or a year ago, and he says, yeah, it's the end of the earth. So it was a fairly, you know, it was built in '65 by Seabees, and it's just, it took a long time to get it built up. By the time I got there, we had, you know, the normal stuff, but back when they were in there, it was Tent City, so. But I thank you guys for doing this. It's good to be able to talk about some of this stuff. But and you know, and I want everybody that listens to these or sees these that, you know, we cared, we did what we wanted. You know, we cared about our country, we cared about our fellow comrades and all that. And yeah, it's the problem we had when we come back is we were told to suck it up and bury it. Well, you can only bury it for so long before it starts eating at you, and that's what happens along the way. And thankfully, you know, we finally got the thanks from a lot of the people who back then didn't really want to talk about us or anything like that. You know, I went to the VFW when I got back, and the guys wanted me to join, so I went to talk to the guys, and it was World War II and Korea vets that I was talking to about signing up for, and they says, we don't want you guys, you losers. So that was my early introduction to VFW. Since then, you know, 20 years later, I belong to the VFW, the American Legion. I'm active in the VVA, Vietnam Veterans of America. I was a past secretary. And the DAV, Disabled Americans. And together we served. You know, those are the, you know, so I'm a lifetime member of all those organizations, but mainly it's the VVA I'm involved in. We do, you know, we help the veterans. The whole thing there was never again will one generation of veterans forget another, which is what happened when we came back. So when the vets were coming back from Iraq and Afghanistan, we were there for them. And so that feels good. It feels good.
I think that's why we do this, because we absolutely want your story to be heard by everyone. And we need the civilians to know. We need these teenagers to know. We need these 20-somethings to know. We need people that are interested in the service to know. This is how it really goes down. It's not Captain America. He's cool and all, but it's not that.
No.
This is, and this is also how it's changed, right? Because what you went through is not what I went through. Yeah. Although what you just said about how, you know, going from Tent City to like, you know, when you first arrive in Iraq to what it looks like now. Yeah, so when they started Desert Storm, and then when I got there, it's different. So, and you see the pictures and all, so I can agree, right?
Well, remember, you, like me, are part of the 1% of the nation that, you know, write that blank check and say, we'll serve. And that's what counts. So thank you again for your service.
I couldn't have done it without leaders like you. Absolutely. Okay, so I have a few more questions to ask you, if that's all right.
Yeah.
Okay. I think you've covered this, but I want to be specific
Okay.
in this question. What are some life lessons that you've learned from your military service?
To work as a team, that's the only way you're going to survive, especially like when you're on the gunship. You know, yes, the aircraft commander, he's the commander, and everybody works through him, but everybody's strong as an individual. You had to be 100% or more, 110%. You know, no drinking, no drugs, no nothing. Anybody like that, we had to get rid of them because survival is the key. And learning to work as that one team, you know, basically metamorphosis is the story. Metamorphosis of the man, the machine, and the mission into one entity, and that's what you were. And that's when you went out and did your job and came back to go fight again. That's the important part, is learning to be part of that team, something bigger than yourself that you can be proud of.
Absolutely. Is there anything you feel like we haven't discussed or should be added to this interview?
Oh, that was a tough one on that question, but there's so many different things, spend hours and stuff on it like that, but you know, it's just the experience that you have to experience. And then that's what we're all talking about, is that experience. Even the same guys I flew with saw something different than I saw on the same mission, on the same thing. It's, you know, how your perception and everything is, what your ideas are at the time, what you're thinking. Everybody sees something a little bit differently, and just understand that. And, you know, yeah, you're all working together, but, you know, different priorities and different things. So, yeah. It's that experience, and you only get it by being part of it, as you know. Yeah. And every job counts. Every job. Every job.
For every one infantryman, 10 support.
Yeah.
What message would you like to leave for future generations who will view or hear this interview?
Be part of the 1%. Have that experience in your life. You know, you're not going to get it you're not going to get that level of training. You're not going to get that level of integration with, you know, the different teams and everything like that, and be part of something bigger than yourself. That's the best thing I can say for that. You know, be part of that team. You know, maybe 4 years, maybe 6 years, maybe 10 years, maybe, you know, a career. But until you have that experience, you haven't lived.
That concludes our interview with Lawrence Peterson. Thank you so much for your time today and for your military service.
Thank you.